Welcome to the Therapeutic Food Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Marian Mitchell. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach, therapeutic diet expert, and founder of The Road to Living Whole. There are many different diets out there. It's hard to know which one is right for you with your chronic illness and autoimmune disease. In this podcast, I'm going to share with you the foundational pieces every single therapeutic diet out there shares, and also how to use the best one for your particular diagnosis. If you've been looking for a meal planning partner, help navigating the complicated healthcare system, and want to feel better quickly, I'm your girl. Grab your kombucha and notebook. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I have an amazing interview for you today. I am so excited because in the chronic illness world, mental health is so essential, but it's also so neglected. For one, as we're on our journey of our bodies aren't functioning right, we're told we're crazy, we're depressed, we're dismissed, until our labs get bad enough that we're taken seriously, which is beyond frustrating. But then once you're in the chronic illness, it's lonely and you are tired and it's really hard to do all of the things. And Dr. Deborah Zucker, she has been on this journey herself, and through that has become from a naturopathic physician to a mental health counselor and has written a book. I think that she has a lot of value to your experience and will be able to give you a path to kind of focus on that mental health aspect that is so neglected, yet we need so much. So Dr. Deborah, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you share your story? How did you, become a naturopathic physician? What is your chronic illness story? And then let's just go from there.
Yes. Well, thanks so much, Marian. I'm really happy to be here. And yes, what you said, this whole realm of the inner journey of the mental health and how we are with ourselves through our chronic illness is absolutely vital. And
Mm-hmm.
my own journey began in my early 20s. I spiraled down into a deep chronic fatigue and depression and had a host of other symptoms and was utterly bewildered. I was in my early adulthood and just sort of out there starting my life, and
Yeah.
had these ideas of what that was going to look like. And then instead I found myself in bed and not really able to do much of anything for many months and had to kind of start, not knowing anything. I grew up in a very mainstream, I grew up in the Midwest, a very mainstream orientation towards healthcare. And so I began, seeking out help on the physical levels and then
Yeah.
felt like this isn't really getting at what is really going on. And so, yeah, just step by step, found my way to exploring more of the mental, emotional, spiritual dimensions of my health. And I found that as I was going, forward, everything I was learning, I was wanting to share with other people because I was like, people need to know this. Like
Yeah.
yeah, this needs to be discovered. And so that led me to study naturopathic medicine, and then later mental health counseling and health coaching. And so I just kept adding on different skills and capacities as I went because I
Mm-hmm.
just found that naturally as I was in my own healing journey, which was like paralleling, the professional training.
Right.
I just kept, being in that inquiry of what's missing in the conversation. What is it that I'm finding that's actually supporting my well-being that I'm not being trained in and that's not being talked about? And
Mm-hmm.
and that eventually led to my book, The Vitality Map, and the 9 keys to deep vitality in there, where I really distilled down what I see as those missing pieces. And I've come to call them basic life skills that we weren't taught.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Mental health is definitely, it's I think in today's culture, it's almost overemphasized, but what people are looking for help with isn't also what's helping either. And so I would love to dive into these 9 keys because, I looked over them and I love them. And I don't think that it's necessarily what people are addressing, especially in the thick of symptoms and all of that. So I would love for you to just walk us through that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, key number one is honoring your unique life. So this key is really about starting at the foundation. It's being in an awake, aware relationship with the preciousness of our own lives. And I know we all touch into that, if someone close to us dies or a tragic accident happens in front of us, or, we have these moments where we wake up and we're like, oh my gosh, like life could end at any time. Like I don't know how long I'm going to be here or any of us are going to be here. And we really take our lives for granted. And
Hmm.
then that fades away. And so
Yeah.
this key is about how do we actually cultivate that day to day, that remembrance, so that our relationship with our own self-care in our life becomes rooted in that deep honoring, that it's like rather than caring for ourselves feeling like a burden, it
Hmm.
becomes an honor, a privilege.
I
And
love that because in chronic illness, self-care does feel like a burden. It feels like it gets in the way of all the other things we need to do, just to keep functioning. We have family and friends and jobs and it's just there's so many responsibilities and I notice a lot with my clients that self-care feels like a burden.
yes, exactly. So these 9 keys, part of my motivation to share them with the world is that feels like our entire relationship with self-care, with our health, it needs healing. Like it's
Hmm.
like at a foundation because, yeah, like you said, the burden, and we have this whole long list of all the things we're supposed to be doing to take care of ourselves. And
Hmm.
then it's like, then it becomes like having to sort of will ourselves into doing these things. And it becomes one more thing that makes us feel stressed out.
Yeah, so I was thinking all the guilt that comes with it. So like I always like I love Pinterest, right? And there's always like 50 things to do to take care of yourself. And then I follow, these professionals and they're like, "Okay, so I spend 30 minutes in front of my red light there, box and I make sure I meditate and then I make sure so like their morning rituals like 3 hours,
Right.
right? And it's like people that have kids that have spouses that have like nobody wants to wake up at 3 a.m.
Oh,
to spend 3 hours in self-care. And while understand that all these things can be beneficial, you can also get them in free ways. And like it's just, yeah. And then the guilt of, oh, I can't do everything perfectly, so I'm never going to get better.
right.
Right. Like it's just it's so debilitating for people. And I think really does a disservice. And I feel like social media, because it's sound bites, right? That it really does a disservice because everybody feels like they're failing in the self-care department because they can't do all of the things.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah, you articulated that so beautifully. And it breaks my heart
Mm-hmm.
of just how riddled we are with the self-judgments and with the shame. And that
Mm-hmm.
to me is woven right into these 9 keys because that is absolutely necessary to heal. Like if we are not turning towards ourselves with kindness and love and care, even in the subtle ways, that we might pressure ourselves or feel like we're not doing what we ought to be doing, or that somehow it's our fault that we're sick. I know that can be such a
Yes.
part, it was for me, of the chronic illness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. Yeah. So maybe that actually is a good lead into key number 2, which is facing and embracing your shadows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this one acknowledges that we all have parts of us that are kind of running the show that we're not conscious of.
Mm-hmm.
And and when we have the courage as well as the support to turn towards those parts and come to understand them and accept them and love them and really integrate them into who we are, that the ways that we experience avoidance or self-sabotage or those really loud, mean voices in our heads, those start to soften and we can find attraction and be able to guide ourselves with kindness and love, as well as with actually being able to sustain the changes we seek. So there's a lot to this key, and it's hard to synthesize, briefly, but I just want to name like it's not your fault. Like we all have these parts, and to bring that big dose of self-compassion and also understanding that it's really important to tend to these parts that yeah, might not be integrated fully. And
Yeah.
and this is a realm that thankfully is becoming more mainstream with things
Mm-hmm.
like internal family systems and other parts work, and as well as, yeah, different modalities within mental health.
Yeah.
To,
The term that comes to mind is inner child.
yes, yes, that's Yes.
and how that child is hurting and afraid. And then when we embrace it and allow them to process those feelings and stuff and realize they're not so big, I feel like that's what, comes to mind for me. But that's also really, people are really scared of
Mm.
that, and I think sometimes it's the fear of change. If I don't have that, what do I have? It's the same with chronic illness. Like when we identify ourselves as our illness,
Right.
then all of a sudden, who are we without it? And it kind of impedes the healing. I feel like that kind of comes into play here. Maybe it comes into play later as well. But like, I
Mm.
really think about that and how, like I'm an MS warrior instead of I'm just a person whose body's saying that this is the body's way of saying, hey, you need to take care of me. We identify ourselves with our disease, right? And I almost feel like that happens with our trauma responses too. Like, oh, this is just how I deal with things. And it's like, no, that's not healthy.
Right. Yeah, you just named a couple really wonderful examples of the shadows at work. Yeah, when we're identifying as a disease, that's an example of that. And
Mm-hmm.
not, and it's a natural response, that we would do that, given how front and center and all-consuming it can feel.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that is not who we are in our essence. And to separate that out and attend to that part, but not identify. Yeah, and same, the m much of our shadows are rooted in traumas, big or small, and sometimes, traumas that are handed down through the generations. So,
Yeah.
so again, to not personalize it as something wrong with us, but that we all have that, and it's a deep part of the healing that I think is missing in the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
around physical health in particular. That
Yeah.
tending to these shadows is absolutely vital.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Shall I go on to the?
Yep. Let's go
Yeah.
on to key number 3.
Yeah, so key number three is strengthening your self-awareness muscles. And this one too is, a big missing piece because
Yeah.
and what I feel like, wouldn't it be wonderful if all of us as children just grew up having this modeled, like having it just be part of what we learn as we grow up? Like, oh, that symptom I'm feeling right now, what's the feedback that might be there for me? What is my
Mm-hmm.
body being trying to say to me right now? To
Mm-hmm.
actually really cultivate that level of intimacy with ourselves so that we can be grounded in a sense of empowerment and self-authorship. I think so
Yeah.
often what can happen and feel really, really challenging when we're navigating significant illness is that we defer our powers over to those who, yeah, have the degrees and the licenses and sort of the credentials to tell us what we're supposed to do for our health. And and it can be really, really confusing,
Mm-hmm.
of how, yeah, everyone's telling us something different. A new health fad or new research comes out every week, and we're spun around and we don't know what to believe. And
Mm-hmm.
so this key is really about starting with a foundation of empowered self-intimacy, where we actively cultivate our own awareness so that we can receive the feedback when it's,
Mm-hmm.
more of a gentle whisper rather than, a big knock on the head, you know.
Yeah. So what comes to mind for me as a health coach is when I'm helping people transition more to a whole foods based way of eating and how that almost clears the noise in the body, right? Because there's so much inflammation because of all the junk coming in, and then we start cleaning that up and giving the body the fuel that it needs. And then all of a sudden, we're able to pinpoint pain, right? Like all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I've been feeling great. And then I did this, and now my body's crying out this way. And just that like self awareness. And I feel like that happens with our emotional stuff too. When we start clearing out the clutter of our schedules, right? The necessary from the unnecessary. Um, we're able to actually calm down to the point where, like, if we're interacting with someone and we have a pit in our stomach, we can be like, oh, why do I have that? Right. And so instead of just being almost numb because there's so much coming in at all times that we're able to actually, but when your body's speaking Greek and you speak English, and it's like, I don't know what this is trying to tell me. And I feel like that's where the outside guidance is really helpful. But also in the fact that what we perceive as reality versus what is reality can be very different too. And I think, again, that outside help can be really beneficial in navigating that. But it's definitely a process, right? But you even have to get to a point where you can feel things. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is, it's a lifelong journey of
Mhm.
continuing to cultivate our awareness and to fine tune and to have more confidence in it. Because, like you said, it's like learning a whole new language. And
Mhm.
yeah, and actually being able to, yeah, discern what it is, because we can interpret things in all different ways. So to really fine tune that discernment, to feel confident and like, oh, this is what this is telling me. I had been interpreting it in this way. And
Mhm.
and like you said, it's like it's having that empowered self-intimacy isn't about not leaning in for support but it's actually filtering that support through your own self-knowing.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And so the next one is cultivating resilience. I love this topic because everybody thinks the goal is like to to be free of like stress and to be free of all these things, and that's just not reality at all. So I love this one.
Yes. Yeah, we just named the core of it because the core of this one is that there's no such thing as a stress-free life. And kind of the nature of life is that it just keeps changing and evolving. So we're going to keep getting older. Our contexts in our lives are going to keep changing. We're going to think we have our act together and then bam, something happens that sideswipes us, and it's just um, to really orient our relationship with our own self-care around that
Mhm.
the end goal isn't some point in time or some sense of I've made it to vitality, but it's actually like how do we really cultivate the resilience so that when we do get, the rug pulled out from underneath us, we can find our feet again and stand up and keep moving forward. And
Yeah.
and to do so in a way where there's not, some expectation of it looking a certain way.
Yeah. So what comes to mind for me is my clients who, again, it kind of comes with this, if I can't do everything perfectly, I'm never going to get better. And this is when they're like neck deep in symptoms and they're bobbing up and down. They're barely surviving, right? And I think the hardest struggle I have as their coach is helping them reach a point where they can be like, you don't have to be perfect to still heal, and not your environment doesn't have to be perfect. Like mold, for example, like sometimes you can't leave that environment for a while. And yes, it is toxic, but everybody's like, you have to leave. But if you're stuck there, then you feel like nothing I do is going to work. And so then nothing works
Right.
because the mind is so powerful, and it's like getting to the point where it's like I'm doing what I can, I'm supporting my process, and that's where resiliency comes in, right?
Mhm.
And that flexible way of thinking, but also trusting that the body can take care of itself despite things like it's trying to keep you alive, right? And trusting in that process. I think a lot of people that are really really in the thick of it really really struggle with.
Yes. Yes. And to recognize, as you said, just how important the mindset is. And again, some of what you're speaking to gets back to key number two with the facing and embracing the shadows. A lot of us have, an inner strict parent part that's really loud, that wants us to be perfect and do everything. And it's like that just creates this ongoing stress. And then others of us have, the inner rebellious teenager that's really loud. And some of us, or a lot of us, flip-flop between the two. And yeah, and just recognizing like those are parts of us that are trying to help us, but they're actually not serving, what we're really needing. And
Mhm.
yeah, and just that one of the things that we can do for resilience is actually cultivate our capacity to self-regulate and being able to calm our nervous system and ground ourselves in the midst of whatever's going on is absolutely essential. And
Mhm.
more and more essential as our world gets crazier and crazier. It's like, how do we like really find our way back to ourselves? So there's a lot, the chapter about cultivating resilience, there's lots of different ideas of practices and things to learn, not as like creating a really long to-do list of what you're supposed to do, but more just recognizing like, okay, to become more skillful in this, there might be some things I need to learn or some professional expertise to bring on board that's going to help me guide myself with more resilient capacity.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that leads us to key number 5.
Yeah. Key number five is one of my favorites. It's aligning with your yes. And this one was for me in journeying with chronic fatigue. This one was such a huge learning for me. And it was a big missing piece with all the supports I was getting, all different kinds of practitioners. No one was really talking about this, which is how essential it is that each of us tune in to what is uniquely aligned for us in everything, every aspect of our lives. So you can think of it as an investment. Like, am I investing my life energy where I'm getting returns? Or am I investing my life energy where it's just going down like the hole in the bucket? And
Hmm.
and to kind of guide ourselves, through our lives with that inquiry of like, yeah, what brings me alive? And to watch it, that's again sort of the learning that strengthening our feedback muscles.
Hmm.
Is It's like to watch as we're engaging in our work, as we hang out with a certain group of friends, as you know we do our volunteer service, just like watching all the different things that we're engaged with, as well as what it's like in our home life, and seeing like what energizes me, what gives me a sense of aliveness. And this is regardless of what illness you might be navigating, because
Hmm.
we can all sense when we're lifted up a bit and when, yeah, we feel like we're collapsing our burdens,
Yeah.
regardless of what our baseline norm might be.
What I also like about this is, again, I have a couple of clients, particularly in mine, who are just in the thick of it right now. And so, like, even the stuff that they love to do is such a burden. And I think that this is again where self-awareness comes in and resilience comes in, because it's like if your family is a priority, and it's like I'm in this, I have 16 to 1, right? So I have this whole age range of kids, and my teenager almost needs me more than my 1 year old, right? And like their life is so busy, and I feel like I'm kind of teaching them how to do life again, just at a different level. And it's exhausting, but it's like my family is so important to me that I'm willing to embrace the really hard stuff that doesn't necessarily nourish my soul, but I know it nourishes my goal, which is to have a healthy family and to have kids who can function in the adult world. And I feel like, again, this is where I think resilience really comes in, is like this does nourish me, knowing that my kids are going to be good adults and they're going to go off into the world with a strong foundation. Like that's really hard, right? And we don't see the result of that until they're like 25,
Mm,
and it's like, I think the power of the yes is like when you embrace, okay, these are my priorities, these are my values, and I'm only going to do things that nourish this. It does allow you to say no to all the other things, but there's still a lot of mess in
mm,
that yes.
yeah.
And I think that that's what people tend, again, when you're already exhausted and you're physically struggling and all of this, I feel like that's where the mental aspect of like values and priorities and the yes is so important, because it's like, okay, if this is my yes, then I'm going to embrace all the messy in the yes.
I love that, the mess and the yes. Yeah, I'm going to take that away. Yeah. Yeah, and I think what you're also speaking to is the other aspect of this key is, and that I like to use the analogy of pruning for, that
Mm,
aligning with your yes means really getting clear about your no's. And this can
hmm.
change, from yeah, day to day, week to week at different stages in our life. But to have the discernment to prune away what no longer belongs in our lives. And
That's
and
hard and scary.
oh, it's really, yeah, it can bring up a lot. Sometimes it's
Hmm.
just a little snip here or there, and sometimes, it can be something big that needs
An
to,
entire branch or
right.
splitting.
Right. But if
Yeah.
you think about like a fruit tree, if a fruit tree is not pruned, it's going to stop producing fruit.
Hmm.
All the energy is going to go into those sucker branches that go straight up on the top of the tree, and it's not going to actually support the flourishing of that tree. And we're the same
Hmm.
way. So
Yeah.
again, like if we don't have the courage, and sometimes we need support for that, if we don't have the courage to prune away what no longer belongs, we're just losing our life energy all over the place, and it's not actually supporting our flourishing in life. And yeah, and so getting clear, as you said, about our priorities and values, and having the courage to align our life with that. Yeah.
Yeah. I went through a season of pruning back in 2021.
Mhm.
Oh, and that was not by choice. And then it became by choice. But the initial pruning was not by choice. And it was the most, I felt like I was in a washing machine. I just couldn't get my feet about me. I
Mhm.
was just so stressed. And I felt like, I was just in the dark clinging. And but on the other side of that, when the smoke cleared and the pruning was done, I was so grateful
Right.
for it. And I feel like sometimes that chronic illness can do that for us because it forces us. It's not something we would choose to be the catalyst, but change never is
Right.
by choice. And it can really be a catalyst for taking care of ourselves and realigning our values and all of that. So yeah.
Yes, yes to that. And yeah, and I really, just as I started, to say with this key, like this was huge for me in my chronic illness journey. And it did take a lot of courage because some of the things that needed to get pruned away, were things maybe I'd invested a lot of time and energy in, and others really, expected me to show up and do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or yeah, it meant sort of letting go of a relationship or there's those were like some of the really significant things that allowed me to begin to get some traction of having more sustained energy in my life again. So, yeah,
Yeah.
this one's a big one. I just really want to emphasize it for folks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I see how they build. Like
Yeah.
I really see that and how it's really cool.
Mm.
Actually, like I can see how they're building. And so our next one is playful curiosity. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, so this one is experimenting with playful curiosity and really what I love about this one is it takes away the seriousness that can be so much a part of our healing journeys.
Yeah.
And there is a serious aspect of it, so it's not to deny that at all, but it's also opens things up, sort of takes the lid off that, oh, like it's not about getting it right. It's about learning as I go. So it's like really
Hmm.
seeing ourselves in this ongoing journey of evolution and unfolding. And if we shift it from like, I do it right and or I fail, which our minds can so easily do,
Hmm.
instead get into an experimental and curious orientation and bring some playfulness into it. It's like, oh, we
Yeah.
get to just try something out and
Yeah.
yeah, give it a try for a couple weeks, see what happens and learn from it. And either we scrap the whole thing or we adjust our experiment or we keep going with what was working. And just to allow ourselves that fluidity and flexibility because that's life, again,
Mm.
like life unfolds in yeah, in a non-linear, unpredictable way. So if we
Yeah.
can have our own journey of self-care mirror that, where it's flexible and adaptable, and we get to kind of dance our way forward,
I
um,
love that.
it brings, yeah, and I can see it, it's just like this key for me too, it brings a sense of joy and
Yeah.
a lightness and a playfulness because it's like, oh, right, it doesn't need to be so hard.
Yeah. And for me, I love cooking. I used to be really bad at it. And
Yeah.
I just got to this point where I'm like, well, if I'm going to be healthy, I have to figure this out. And there were plenty of fails that we still laugh about as a family and with my friends. Like, do you remember when? And, my dad thinks it's hilarious that like I had published a cookbook years ago. And he's just
Mm.
like, you published a cookbook because like I'd be the one that something would be burnt, something that would be undercooked, one thing would be just right. And none of it would really taste very good. And now like I'm at the whole other end of the spectrum, but I had to be willing to just play around.
Yes.
And I learned the basics, which you have to be willing to like be teachable. And then it was like, all right, from here, I don't really like this, but what if I do this and see what happens, right? And then same with exercise. Like I wasn't great at yoga the first time I tried it. I wasn't great at strength training and I wasn't great at all these things. And it's like, when you go hiking and you forget a water bottle and you're dying halfway through, right? Like it's like it makes for a funny story, but it's like people get so crushed by those things,
Okay.
especially when it was you put so much energy into getting out of the house to do it in the first place, when it's really just like, okay, well, that I'm gonna laugh about this fail later. Like these brownies really suck and they're rock hard and they taste like dirt, and then the next, and then three tries later, they're the most amazing thing that's a favorite. Right.
Yeah.
And I think people just get so caught up in the I'm not perfect right now.
Mhm.
type of thing. So I love that, which leads us into discovering easeful discipline. I love
Mm.
easeful discipline. A
Yes.
lot of people feel confined by
Mm.
discipline, but there's really freedom in it. So let's talk about that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so as you just said, these two keys really go together. I think
Mhm.
sometimes people can see this key and especially the word discipline, which can trigger all sorts of, mean
Gosh,
voices in our
goes
head.
back to number two with the shadows.
Right, exactly. Just that pressure and like the critical voices and all of that. So this is a different version of discipline. So I just want to say that, and it goes with the previous key. So that orientation of experimentation and curiosity is right here with the discipline. But, discipline is needed because with
Mhm.
any habit change, any transformation in our lives, like there's a period that's uncomfortable when we're sort
Mhm.
of navigating through, and you name some of that with just the practices of learning some of those new things. Like it can be uncomfortable and awkward, and we don't immediately get that feedback of like, oh, right, this makes me
Yeah.
feel great.
Well, one of the things that I find, especially because of social media again, is the next new shiny thing,
Right.
right? We try something for like one day, maybe 3 days, maybe a week, maybe two, but eventually something happens that derails us, quote unquote. And then we just kind of go, okay, well, that failed. And it's like, you have to stick with things for a while to know if they work. Like we're talking 3 to 6 months,
Mhm.
right? Like you really have to stick with it, and you can't just be running after every new shiny object. And I think, and I almost find it as a way of self-sabotage as well. But yeah, discipline comes in, but people don't like that.
Right, right, because their orientation to discipline has been mean.
Hmm.
And this is, bringing in the experimentation. So you're trying something out with the spirit of learning, but you're actually being really intentional around setting yourself up for success. So I think one of the things with discipline is like it comes with like, oh, I got to will myself into this, and it's really hard. But I've identified three different areas of discipline that really help to make it easeful. The first is getting super clear about what our commitment is, really refining that down.
Hmm.
The second is creating intelligent strategies. So actually taking the time to kind of think through like what might work, what gets in the way, what are the obstacles, which I also
Hmm.
tend to refer to as competing commitments because often there's other needs there in the obstacles that are not being tended to. So
Hmm.
making sure you're addressing all the different needs and just being smart about it. Like, okay, like if I want to do yoga, like maybe I need to clear out a room and I need to like go buy a yoga mat and I need, just like setting yourself up for success. And then the third is structures of support. And there's all different kinds of support. And another key, the next key is all about the people support. But there's also, calendar reminders and notes around our house, love notes to ourselves, encouraging us, like listening to inspiring things that sort of put us in that mindset. There's a whole bunch of different things we can do that really create that container that allows us to be in that active learning. So then we
Hmm.
create an experiment that has that structure around it that allows us to sustain it long enough that we can get some clear feedback around whether that really works for us or not.
Yeah. And so that leads us into inviting support and connection.
Yeah. And this one, it's key number 8, but I really like to think of it as sort of what holds them all. Um, Absolutely vital. And this too was a huge learning for me in my healing journey. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
I'm so grateful for it because, I think one, our illnesses can sometimes feel so isolating,
Hmm.
the only one. And even if we might lean into a practitioner, one-on-one here or there can still just be this sense of having to do it all on our own.
Hmm.
And I really want to encourage everyone to bring an orientation of a team of support so that no one person is holding it all with us, but we realize like there's lots of different kinds of support that can serve us, you know,
Yeah.
and different ways of getting creative with that to really allow for, again, more of that container of accountability and encouragement and that mutuality that can come from being in it with others. That
Hmm.
I think we're just wired that way as human beings. And
Yeah.
yeah, we're relational creatures, so we need each other and to embrace that as part of the healing journey and not that there's anything wrong with us for needing support.
Yeah, definitely. And then that leads us to key number 9, but as we're wrapping up, which is living like you matter.
Yeah.
Whew, that's
Yes.
a hard one. It's a good one.
Yeah.
But I just know, especially as a mom and a wife and, a business owner and all of that, like, whew,
Yeah.
I mean, it's wonderful. And I can see how every key supports that, but that's a hard one.
Yeah, it can be. I think, especially for those of us, and probably many of us women are wired this way, where it's like there's just sort of this natural orientation, or can feel natural to like serve others and show up and care for everyone else, and yeah, for our work and for our loved ones and for our communities at large. It's like there's just this giving, which is really natural and important also for our well-being.
Hmm.
And we neglect ourselves in the process, or we're sort of second to that. And
Hmm.
this key is really about putting ourselves first and foremost, that like it's absolutely vital that we fill our own well, that we tend to our own well-being as the foundation for how we show up in service for everyone else. And
Yeah.
it connects right back to key number 1. It makes a full circle of honoring your unique life, like really living from that place, like I'm the only me there ever is and will be, wow, like just let that sink in, not just from a mental place, but just like, yeah, to really let that sink in, that, yeah, you are a unique life. We each are, and to tend to and guide ourselves in this life journey, regardless of what challenges present themselves. I really, another thing I want to say to the chronic illness piece that was so pivotal for my learning was just really dropping into a deep gratitude for all it has taught me and the way it has guided my journey and really clarified who I am and what it is I'm here to bring, and um, learning things in a way that brought me to my knees, but learning things that I never would have learned otherwise.
Yeah.
And so like really embracing whatever life brings to us as part of our unique journey, and that we're guiding and tending to ourselves and our own resilience and well-being in the midst of that, so that we have more to show up and offer.
I
Yeah.
I really I love all of this, and I love that you know what people are going through, and this has been your continuous ongoing journey through it, and you help people work through that because it can be just so debilitating. And to me, this actually, while understanding each key, like I can see just the great value in it, but also it's not as scary as some other, like the thought of facing things is always so scary, right? And there's always like this one thing that always holds us back. And knowing that there's a blueprint on how to navigate that is just so helpful. So I'm so grateful that you have leaned in and you're sharing your journey and your path with others. I know it's going to be so beneficial. How can people connect with you?
Yeah. Well, you can go to my website, which is vitalmedicine.com. And my book is The Vitality Map. You can find it Amazon or any bookstore. It's available in audiobook as well as ebook and paperback. And yeah, and I offer a range of different virtual and in-person programs, primarily group, but also some one-on-one support as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything that you would like to leave our listeners with before we wrap up today?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think just what we were just speaking to is what comes front and center. Like, you matter. Like investing, yeah, in your own well-being matters, um, and you're not alone. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining me today.
Thank you, Marian. I really appreciated the conversation with you.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. If you found this episode helpful, would you do me a favor and help others find it by leaving a review, sharing a screenshot on social media, or sharing the link with a friend? By you sharing what you've learned, others are able to find this podcast and join our community. Be sure to check out my website, www.roadtolivingwhole.com, for over 160 delicious recipes, a variety of meal plans, and a blog packed full of even more healthy living tips. If you'd like to learn more about how to work with me as your coach, you can schedule a free consult through www.roadtolivingwhole.com/health-coaching/. Until next time, friend. Bye.